You know, this week at Holy Trinity Parish in St. Edmund Schools, we're trying to focus on our stewardship of vocations. And so I was asked if I'd just share a little bit about my own story to a vocation to priesthood. And so I thought I'd start with just a little bit about, well, where I grew up and how that progressed on to ultimately going on to seminary. You know, I grew up in a family of 9. I mean, there were 6 siblings, mom and dad. I'm a twin. My twin brother is deceased, but again, that he died here a number of years ago. But we grew up as just what we kind of thought as a typical Catholic family in St. Joseph's Parish in Jefferson, Iowa. I was involved in various things, going and graduated from Jefferson Community High School. That was in 1972, and all throughout school I was involved in different things from sports, particularly football for me, student government. Sang in the choir in junior high and early parts of high school. And people said, well, what kind of interest does that carry on now for you? Well, again, I like to follow football, enjoy watching sports on television, and certainly my life as a priest, it kept me involved in governance in many different levels, not only here at the parish level, but also at the diocesan level. As kids growing up in Jefferson, we all worked outside the home. I remember starting, probably when I was in the 6th grade or so, just helping to front some milk cases at local grocery stores, making sure that the milk was all pulled to the front of the shelf, as I went to school, and did the same thing after school. And then eventually, myself and all of my siblings, or most all of my siblings, we had part-time jobs at the local corner grocery store, which was owned by a local family there, and it kept us busy stocking shelves, carrying out groceries and the like. It was just I guess what you'd say, a pretty normal childhood. And, again, people say, well, what did you want to be when you were a child, growing up? What came to mind? Well, I mean, there were a variety of things, of course, I suppose, like it is for most elementary students. When I was in junior high, that's when the thought of priesthood really came to mind. Now, I do, or have an uncle who was a priest. He's now deceased, but served in this diocese for, well over 50 years. And when I got into high school, however, I was interested more in officiating sports. I played sports, but became, an umpire in baseball, softball, and did some officiating in football and basketball. But really, that led me after high school to decide to go away and go to umpire school. So I took off and went to Florida to participate in umpire school. That was run by umpires from the American and National Leagues. I was involved in that way just because it was an interest of mine. And again, back in 1974, those years, well, if you wore glasses, they said, well, then you cannot simply work for us in the professional game. But I put that to use, and it was a way to pay for a lot of college that as I worked in the summers as an umpire. I returned home after that experience and returned to, work locally until I entered a community college. But it was at that time, in a particular way, that a parishioner from St. Joseph's, who happened to be a medical surgeon who had his practice there and was a member of the parish, he knew that I had expressed an interest at one point in time about looking at priesthood, and he just suggested one night, frankly, at a high school football game that I was watching there in Jefferson, that I might consider just re-examining that whole idea of priesthood. And then he was a person who just pointed out different aspects of what he thought my attributes were that could be, lend its way to serve well in the priesthood. So I thought, I probably should really listen to that. So that became a source and center of some prayer and inquiring with the Diocese of Sioux City about what it would take during a course of college studies to continue that whole idea of discernment to the priesthood. Um, and I suppose you could kind of say, well, the rest is history. I went on and finished my degree at Loras College and went from the college seminary there on to the North American College in Rome, where I completed my various degrees at the Gregorian University as a Bachelor in Theological Sciences, and then went on for not only a master's degree, but on for a doctorate degree in moral theology years following. And it was really that course of, well, the college seminary, as well as those first years in the seminary at the North American in Rome, that you work through all those discernment questions about just what it is that, well, that the Lord's calling you to serve his flock. Well, I'm 40 years a priest this coming year, so I've had a vast experience in ministry. I've been involved in administrative, pastoral aspects of ministry at the diocese and parochial level, but also because of my exposure in terms of education in Rome, I was also called back to the seminary to serve in various capacities there as a business manager and ultimately as its rector. So I've had a number of opportunities that have been involved here and abroad that have been highlights of my priesthood. And what brings you joy about all of that is that, you know, whatever the role it is that you're doing, you see the Lord's work in people's lives. And that is, that is really quite rewarding. Because what you learn pretty quickly is that you get out of the way just to help people to see God's way in their own life. Well, then they come to see that relationship with Jesus Christ, and quite frankly, they are able to work their way around to following the will of God in their own life at any particular time, either a time of joy or a time of stress. Again, you know, what would I say if someone were to consider a call to the priesthood today? Well, I'd want that person to know that, again, you cannot really discern priesthood all alone. It really is a process. It involves, well, far more than just your own introspection. Entrust yourself to that whole process of discernment of spirits and working with people, because they have your interest really at the front of their interest. If you're right for the priesthood and that call is true, they want you to be able to discern that and to follow it freely. Again, families and, well, our own parish. I mean, it's a matter of, well, encouraging young men and women whom you think might have a vocation to the priesthood or to the religious life, or to even some of our men in the parish to the permanent diaconate. If you can see those attributes that lend their service and ministry to the church, I would just, ask you to invite them. And, we have this process of call by name. I think it's an opportunity for us all to name someone and to identify those attributes that we think recommend them for a consideration of a discernment to priesthood, or the religious life, or as I say, to the permanent diaconate. Don't be afraid of considering those invitations when they're made to you. And again, just don't do it alone. God bless, and thanks for allowing me to share my story.